Had a pretty good run of starting some streams on time, but tonight I didn't really plan for dinner that well. And normally, because I'm on my own, like my dinner will usually just be whatever I wind up having for uh, lunch, or rather, what I have for lunch the next day is usually just because I make some extra dinner. But I didn't really plan things out that way, so I tried to put something together with what was in the fridge with mixed results, and it took me a while. So later start tonight, but I will try and do sort of the full duration. And one of the reasons why I'm on the main screen right now is it has been a very long time since I played this game. So if it's not clear from the title and the tagging, which I'm going to be bringing up right now, I'm going to be playing Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, or as I'm fond of calling it with my delightful Canadian mannerisms, Heckblade. So this game was gifted to me on GOG quite some time ago. Actually, one of the funny bits was the whole purpose of gifting it to me on GOG was so that they could use my my influencer link, and then of course I didn't get paid for that, or well, eventually I did, but suffice to say it took a while, and there was some dispute over it. But sorry, I've also I just finished eating, so I probably have a little bit of a catch in the throat. And it's one of these cases. It's a great example of a game. I think I've got about 4.5 hours in it. And it's a game I really enjoyed. I think I did it because there was like a world mental health day, or there's some occasion that made it sort of appropriate to run with. And I really wanted to get back to it. I really wanted to play it. And as is always the case, a couple of, especially if it's Paradox stuff, because they have been very good at, getting me in touch with things that, not just that I'm interested in playing and I know people want to see, but the release schedule isn't overwhelming. Like I get to do a nice, good run with it, but it does come at a fair clip. So, it kind of felt like for a while I'd be going into, Stellaris, and then I'd lurch into Age of Wonders Planetfall, and then Battletech, and then back to, I guess it wouldn't be Planetfall, but then, I'm back to Stellaris before I've finished the next thing. And that means that sometimes some of the stuff that I had started, it sort of got elbowed out. So Six Ages is a little bit like that, but I wanted to try and do something, it's been very strategy heavy lately. And Cross Country Canada doesn't quite count as something outside of the usual run. So I was originally going to do pick up from where I played. By my playtime, it says I've got about 4.5 hours into it. What I'm going to do instead, though, is I'm actually going to start a fresh save file. One, because I sort of have an idea about the story, but honestly, anybody trying to... Interesting. All right, I'm going to have to try and sort this out then. Anybody trying to find the old stream is probably not going to have the easiest time. And on top of that, I don't really know the controls that well. So it seemed like a good chance to play it. Another reason why I kind of wanted to do this, in addition to the fact that I think it's a really interesting game, from what I understand, the duration is relatively short. So at least compared to, say, The Division 2, where there's clearly a lot to do in that, and they keep adding stuff. Oh, neat. I'm not going to let OBS pick that for me, though. All right, cool. I'll give some... I'm going to quit out just so you can see the opening title again, because there's a cool little bit of backstory to this game, which I think everybody knows. Hey, Johnny Big Time! I'm sure this is probably not the one you were expecting me to play from the list. But, all right, so why isn't... There we go. Hey, Telwyn! Oh, okay, looks like people are really into this choice. Warning, this game contains representations of psychosis. People with experience of psychosis as well as professionals in psychiatry have assisted in these depictions. Oh, too fast for me to read. Yeah, Johnny Big Time's actually seen sort of the grand plan for the stream overall, and he knows. Let me just double check. I'm assuming very high is the highest for everything. Yeah. I'm going to do auto, which I think probably means that the game's going to have mercy on me. Yeah, so for those of you who, I mean, I'm late to the party on this one, and the sequel's just recently been announced, so I'm sure a number of you already know about that. But there's a couple of really interesting things about the origins of this project. So Ninja Theory has made plenty of, popular AAA games for established publishers. And what they wanted to do with this project, I think there were a couple of things that were goals for this project. Yeah, no problem, Johnny. I kind of tend to send stuff when I'm interested, and I realize that kind of creates just this carpet bombing of info. So although the calamari reference was one that I was really weirded out by, so I'm curious your thoughts on that. I hope you're doing well. I'll definitely give you your shout out, but I'd love it if there are a few more bodies in chat to hear of your glory. Also, you might want to check out the new the next season of Division 2. It looks interesting. It looks like that season pass is going to have a bit more content in it, because it sort of feels like most of the stuff you could get in this season pass, like, you could get just through playing the game. Anyways, we're talking about Heckblade. So Ninja Theory, I mean, again, they know how to do really polished, high-budget action games. I think they did some of the Devil May Cry games. Again, I'm not a console player, so I don't really know. And I think the goal of this one was to create... I'm not sure if I'm using the term appropriately here, but this idea of a triple-I game. So if you hear about triple-A, this is sort of like the summer blockbuster of video games. It's the sort of thing where, everything has a really high degree of polish. You've got a very large number of people working for a few years to just make sure that everything is as good as it can be. Usually this is where, like, you don't just have one game, but you have a bunch of little mini games inside of it. So if you think of something like, the Assassin's Creed game, this is a great example of AAA, where, if you think of something, I mean, this is an older example, but it's been a while since I've played an Assassin's Creed game. Like, if you think of the one of the Ezio ones, like, it's not just that you've got Assassin's Creed, you've got, like, a tower defense mini game where you have to defend the assassin dens and whatnot. And, high quality voice acting, just lots of that. And this is something that you don't normally associate with independent games. But one of the things that's really interesting about Ninja Theory's approach was this idea of, well, can we make something with a level of polish? I mean, you can see this image right here on the title screen as an example. Can we make something with this level of polish, but keep sort of this independent spirit? So to create something that will get some kind of return on investment, at least it won't bankrupt the company. To do something that maybe doesn't face these sorts of constraints that a very large budget AAA game will do. So, I mean, for people who want to complain about Hollywood blockbusters or want to complain about, AAA games being very samey, one of the reasons for that is, of course, it has to have a very broad appeal. And this is one of the reasons why independent games can be very interesting, because when like, if you think about some of your favorite indies, that these are not necessarily games that your family members are necessarily going to want to play, unless maybe they're gamers themselves. But they don't need to have mass appeal. They can rely on the fact that they did a narrow thing very well, and that they were able to connect with enough people who are interested to be able to make the money back. And so you wind up with this really interesting game here, which has a level of polish that comes from a very experienced team who's used to making these types of AAA games. But what they decided to do was to go deep into a really interesting story and to deal with sort of mental health issues and to talk with psychologists and to tell this really interesting story. I don't know how much I'll talk over the game. I mean, this is kind of why I'm doing the warm-up here. There's some really interesting ideas inside of it. And again, it plays like a well-done game that you would expect from a big publisher. But in this case, you have something, again, that's why I'm saying this III idea. You've got this game that looks and feels like something that would have come out of Electronic Arts or Ubisoft or Square Enix, but is something that is sort of self-published and self-financed by Ninja Theory. Now, there's, of course, the open question as to whether or not it was a success. And definitely Hellblade made its money back. I think that's a well-known fact. But of course, Ninja Theory is making the sequel under Microsoft. They've since been acquired by Microsoft, and whether they felt that it wasn't viable to continue on sort of this independent path, that Hellblade did work very well, but it wasn't necessarily something they wanted to continue doing on their own, or whether they felt that in Microsoft they had a partner that would allow them to sort of have the expression that they wanted in a game like this, while having sort of the financial resources of a larger company. We won't necessarily know those details. I'm almost certain that Obsidian, which I believe was bought at the same time, theirs was almost certainly a question of financial necessity, because I actually had a disagreement with somebody who worked as a sort of influencer manager about how well Pillars of Eternity 2 did, and they were pointing to like the number of Twitch streams, and I'm like, well, you know what you're talking about, so I guess I'm wrong on this one. And then I actually saw like what happened with the Fig investment and whatnot, and that game did not seem to sell. And of course, that was through a publisher like Versus Evil, but I'm almost certain that Obsidian was short on money and needed to be acquired. So it's a really interesting game for lots of reasons. The subject matter is interesting, but the story behind its development is really interesting too. And so I guess I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to say goodbye to my old save, and we will enjoy Heckblade. Do you own this, Johnny? Because I feel like this is something that you would enjoy.
Hello. Who are you? Doesn't matter. Welcome. You're safe with me. I'll be right here, nice and close, so I can speak without alerting the others. Let me tell you about Senua. Her story has already come to an end, but now it begins anew.
What's happening? It's breathing. It's breathing. It's breathing. He knows she's getting closer. He can feel her coming closer. She's getting closer. They're watching. They're watching. They're watching.
This is a journey deep into darkness. There will be no more stories after this one.
What is she doing? Why is she doing this? They're watching. Why doesn't she feel her coming? She's doing this for him. She wants to rescue him. He's already can feel you coming.
Quiet. Oh, how rude of me. I never told you of the others. You hear them too, right? They've been around ever since the tragedy. Well, that's not quite true. Some are old, some are new, but they've changed. I think the darkness changed them, just like it changed her.
Can you see them over there?
Why isn't You see it too?
You promised you could.
Yes. It is real after all. She's finally arrived in the land of mist and fog. The place the Northmen call hell.
Turn back. Go back. Go back. It's not safe. Go back. Go back. Go back. Go back. It's not safe.
It's them. They're here.
Can you see that? I can see it.
Look around and you'll see them. The drowned, the sick, the slain. Here they lie, rotting in the fields and rivers of hell. But the dead don't always lie still here.
You see them.
This is not a place of rest.
You can't do this. Go back. Go back. They're going to do that to you. Can you see them? Can you see them? They're going to do that to you. They're watching.
Hi, Rain Dog.
Stop.
I'm trying not to talk over the game too much.
They're watching her.
I'm also sorry, things seem a little jittery on the OBS side of things. It's pretty smooth here, and I'm not sure how to fix that. Or I might just be imagining it.
What is she thinking?
Mind you, some of it is just my controls.
She's afraid. Wouldn't you be? You'd think she would get used to it by now after so many years. But the darkness, it just builds onto itself, growing stronger, towering over her. You might try and ignore it, turn away. But it's always there, just out of sight, where you're most vulnerable. It's like it knows that just enough light is all you need to see its suffocating power.
They can feel you.
You might think she's brave to go on this journey on her own, but it isn't bravery that drives her. Bravery only means something to those afraid of death. Then it was fear, runs far, far deeper. What is she looking at? What is she leaving behind? I know what she's thinking. I hear her thoughts. It's not too late to get into the boat and go back. No one will judge her. No one will ever know. Oh, she heard us. There's no going back.
You can't do it.
Senua pushes away a world that conspired to cause so much suffering. There's nothing to go back to, and worse to look forward to. Why don't you join us? Maybe you too have a part to play in this story.
So, normally, like, Johnny's been playing Death Stranding recently, and I've been commenting a lot about how too bad that he's not able to actually play the game. But I think one of the things that makes this opening work really well, obviously the voices play a really big role inside this game, and little nudges like, why aren't you looking around when the titles are going by? Also, as a personal note, as a film thing, I've actually always really liked it when games when movies like sort of have the titles and make them part of the world. So there's a movie David Fincher did called Panic Room, that really made that explicit. It was basically like the 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 words were like part of the cityscape and all of that. So that's a little cinematic technique that I like. And one thing that is sort of a shame about Hellblade is that when I started playing it, I started kind of going around the environment saying, is like, man, like what, like how do they pull stuff like this off? And I was trying to say, it's like, so you've got a bunch of foliage around, and if you actually take a look at the plants, you can see that they're paper thin. But it's only until I was like, how did they pull that off? And then you see little things like the leaves falling are really great, but then you sort of see them just vanish into nowhere. And it actually was until I specifically said, this is so cool. How in the world did a small team...
Look to see. Why isn't she focusing? She needs to focus now.
She needs to use her eyes.
Do not forget my stories, Senua. Because your darkness comes from hell, and your fate lies there. They say the burning of a corpse will take you straight to Hela's gate, but gods and the living will follow this path. You must leave the Isles of Orkney across the eastern sea and find a road that leads north and down through deep, dark valleys. After 9 nights of riding, you will follow a great river and will find a bridge covered in gold. The path to Helheim goes from there, across the River of Knives that flows from the dark world of Niflheim.
Yeah, so in one sense, it's a shame that this thing did such a good job of selling me on the fantasy that I immediately go in and try to like deconstruct how they did it. And I'm sure there's like 101 different tricks that I'm unaware of that they're doing, but it's kind of neat. Now let's see if I can figure out how to get over a log. Okay, walking into it is sufficient. Okay.
Yearns for life, hungers for it, like a pack of wolves on a hunt. But she's not stopping. Not this time.
Can you see it?
The land of mist and fog. The old fool was right. What was it he said?
Sorry.
The river of knives across which lies the halls of hell. The place they call Helheim.
He's lost. He's lost.
Where are you? I hear you.
He's there, you know.
There's no doubt about it. The source of the darkness is in Helheim. And the goddess Hela holds his soul there. her dear beloved, Dillian.
Sorry guys, I just need a minute to adjust a couple of things on OBS. All right, there we go. On the odd chance that somebody says anything or does anything.
Why is she doing this? Why doesn't she turn back? She's doing this for him. She wants to rescue him. He's already dead. He's dead. But his soul is in Helheim. His soul still lives. She needs to save his son. She wants his soul to. Do you know where
The
you
bridge
are?
to Helheim. I forget its name. She forgets too. But she does remember that only the dead may cross it. That part wasn't so easy to forget. The old fool said there was a hidden path up to it. Let's see, shall we?
The Northmen speak of 9 worlds. The world of men they call Midgard. Sky gods dwell in Asgard. The gods of earth, harvest, wind, and sea dwell in Vanaheim. The good elves dwell in Alfheim. The evil ones dwell in Svartalfheim. The mountain giants dwell in Jotunheim. The fire giants dwell in Muspelheim. Niflheim is the world of ice and darkness. Only the dead dwell in Helheim, and that is where you must travel.
A couple of things that I'm also a little conscious about in terms of the way this is set up is again, I'm always really reluctant to talk over the voices. The other thing that I sort of always found interesting was it looks really wide open, and yet I've always never had a problem. Like, I've always kind of known I want to head over here. And I'm sure that there's some very good level design reason for that. But
You're in danger. Do you know where you are? Where are we? Down. What's down there? Why did she do that? She shouldn't have done it. She can't go back now.
No, this is it. The hidden path.
sometimes I just want to see the environments. They look really nice.
He's going to hurt you. It's dangerous.
Don't kill me. I'm not one of them. I was just hiding. I find I live longer that way. I'll never let the bastards catch me again. Never! Wait. Who are you? It's just a memory.
Druth? Is that you?
For my tales of the Northmen, they call me Druth. A liar. An old fool. Truth is my truth.
It's good to see you again. You kept your vow.
Guide you in this life and the next. I will tell you my stories of hell, if I may walk with you.
Tell me your stories again, old friend. I'm listening.
The runes seal the gates to hell. Focus your inner eye, and you too will see what's hidden in plain sight.
Focus. Look closer.
I can see one.
Hold it in your mind's eye. Find one like it to open the gate.
Oh yes, I remember this mechanic. This is a neat one actually. Usually there's some kind of a, like for this one I would assume there's like a couple of branches or something that match it. Maybe seems like a bit of a reach. Yeah. Oh, hang on. I might oh no, I have to be standing still. Okay. So one of the things I'm a little nervous about is I don't know if they do this with the combat too, and I definitely don't remember how to do the attacks and whatnot. I don't seem to remember it being this hard to find last time. Oh, okay. I can walk around. Yeah, there we go.
Its name. Look towards the gate. And the gate will open.
The gate is open. Go through the gate.
Go through it.
It's dangerous.
Follow it.
What's behind the gate?
It worked.
I spent 6 years enslaved in hell. But I watched the Northmen. Learnt their ways.
I know you did.
You listen when everyone else laughed. My people paid a heavy price. Carry my stories with you, and together we will make the Northmen feel our fury.
You don't like games unless there are explosions? I'm sure.
Another voice joins us. She once tried to make them go away. Pretend they weren't real. But what good is that? When we are always here.
There, lightning. It's a sky explosion. I will find a way to get some magic in to blow stuff up for you, Johnny.
I guess it's the same with heights. You can stand on the edge, pretend it's going to be okay. But you know that death is near, waiting for you to make that little slip. You can't just wish things away.
I actually don't remember if I have control over this or not.
The world of the dead is ruled by the giantess, Hela, daughter of Loki. The gods feared her bloodline, bad on her mother's side and yet much worse on her father's. So, as a child, the All-Father cast her down into Helheim and gave her power over those who die of sickness, age, hardship, and self-slaughter. In all of the 9 worlds, only Hela can resurrect the dead. To Hela, your Dillion was sacrificed, and with her you must bargain.
So, funny story about that, Johnny. This was somebody on Twitter shared this. I'm assuming it was a historian, but they found this document in terms of justifying what was basically the murder of sort of Viking visitors because their good grooming and their daily bathing would be a threat to the chastity of their women. So on the balance of odds, Senua's hair smells better than anybody else's in the age. I need to find the exact quote. It was definitely a very fun take. I think this is the first fight. It's been a really long time since I played this, so.
Stay back.
Look at it.
You have to open it.
The gate to Helheim divides the living from the dead. Is that the face of Hela herself? The half-rotten goddess that rules over Helheim. Whatever horrors lie behind that door, she must find him. Shh. Someone's here.
So if memory serves, I think it was like a light attack, a heavy attack, and then there was like some kind of a special that you could build up to. I'm really hoping they explain it.
You took him from me. I beg you. Let him go. I'll give you what you want. I won't resist anymore. Just give him back.
Okay, well, those don't work. Well, I found the block.
End it now. This is nearly the end. Don't let them get behind you.
Ah! Okay, that's the block. Well, I'm dumb.
A vision of what's to come. Poor Senua. The darkness does not bargain. It does not reason. It is rot. And now it has taken hold. It will spread towards her head, the seat of the soul, until there is nothing left of her. All of her suffering will have been for nothing. It's just a matter of time.
So this mechanic was the subject of kind of a spoiler and a debate.
The hardest battles are fought in the mind. That is what Dillian taught her. With every defeat, the dark rot will grow and soon it will take her soul. But for now, at least, she still has control of her mind. And she will fulfill her vow, whatever the cost.
Also, hello, Homoteolysis.
He's not right.
Listen to me, Senua. The goddess Hela lies behind the gate to Helheim. To open the gate, you must first face the gods that guard it. The god of fire, Surt, and the god of illusion, Valravan. Spill their blood to open the gate to Helheim and enter the land of the dead.
So if memory serves, I believe I've taken out both of them. I also think that the game has almost certainly just set me up on the easiest difficulty after that initial...
Two gods, two gates. One of them will kill her, I know.
The Northmen say that in the beginning there was nothing but darkness. Bitter cold to the north, fiery hot to the south. They say the cold formed ice, which melted from the sparks from the south. The power of the darkness gave life to the dripping ice, and the first giant was born, and was named Ymir. The ice continued to drip, and the power of the void gave life to it, and it became a cow, whose milk fed the giant. That's right, a cow. Bet you weren't expecting that.
Actually, funny thing, I was cleaning out my my apartment and my obscene number of books that are now stacked as towers of power. And I bought like a nice little Penguin edition of the sagas of the Northmen, but I sadly have not yet read them. So this is my primer.
And master of ravens. He hunts his prey with his powers of illusion and feasts on their remains. Follow the path to Valravan and defeat him in battle to earn his mark. The gate to Helheim cannot be opened without it.
And Johnny, I bet they're saving Kratos for the sequel. But yeah, there's a couple of things that I can say sort of in terms of the setup too. I think thing that's sort of interesting is it's kind of hard to do a game like this and not have some kind of a comparison to Dark Souls being made. But I think one of the things that's sort of interesting about the way they handle the rot and that line. I mean, obviously there is a lot that's being said about the voices, and particularly the question as to whether or not you are one of those voices, because obviously Senua looks directly at the camera, and they outright say perhaps you'll have a role to play in her story. And the voices are going to be telling you different things about the fight, you know. They're already saying, you know, don't let them get behind you and whatnot. But I think one of the things that was kind of interesting when you think about Dark Souls, they make a really big deal about the idea of despair, and that, you know, yeah, you can keep coming back, but eventually people lose their mind and they become hollow. And so clearly, Dark Souls is sort of set up to give you this impression that it's the hardest game that you've ever played, and that you're, you know, every battle that you do and every battle that you overcome is like the hardest that you've ever encountered. This one, I kind of like how I mean, again, they've sort of set up similar stakes, right? You know, you're able to come back. They say the rot will grow. and the journey will end with it. But particularly there's that line of dialogue that I think it was defeat lies in the mind or something like that. And while it's a subtle shift in terms of kind of the way that Dark Souls takes it, it's one that definitely has been well seated. Like I was talking a bit before in terms of how it's a fairly long intro, which I tend to be a little annoyed by in games because like I really just want to get into them. And in this particular case, the time that they take to set it up starts paying off when you have these lines of dialogue. Like you don't have to have the professor sit you down and say, well, here's what's at stake and here are the things that are happening inside of her mind. Like you kind of already get an idea about what's going on. And I think this game does a nice job of... I mean, I'll admit, I was kind of hunting around for the controls. I definitely wonder what this game would be like to play on mouse and keyboard. But like my stumbling around to find the different attacks and whatnot wasn't too onerous. And I don't know, just the little vignettes that they gave me, I sort of felt like, you know, any player with some investment in terms of what's going on the screen kind of gets what's at stake without having to have this is the explanation for everyone scene.
Ymir was a frost giant, a being of darkness, and all his sons and grandsons were dark after him. Of his daughters and granddaughters, some were monstrous, but others fair. But there was another who came from the ice. Buri. In shape, he was like a man, big and powerful. His son, Bor, took a fair giant to be his wife, and they had 3 sons. Odin was the eldest, and the Northmen hold him to be the foremost of the gods, the All-Father.
This is another thing. I mean, I probably should sit down and learn about how computers render images, but this is one that I sort of learned looking at Anthem, like some of the details on this. I mean, in this case, there's still like a little bit of shape, but obviously a lot of the, what looks like a lot of detail inside of it, if you look at it at the right angle, it's completely flat. But again, it wasn't until this game did such a good job of me saying, is like, how in the world did they do this on an independent budget, that I sort of started taking a look for all of the little secrets. And this is one of the things that I think Heckblade does particularly well. You know, my background is going to be in film, and so to, you know, beyond a CG shot, and even then, like, you have quite a bit that you need to, like, if you're going to have actors inside of it, you still need to set up the material that's going to be recorded. You know, every time you do a shot, every time you do a lighting effect, so even something like that moment at the beginning when we got the rot, to have everything turn dark and her be lit that way, that's not like the hardest problem in lighting. And the gaffers handle that. That's not the camera department, other than the fact that the DOP is responsible for that. Actually kind of want to walk around a little bit before I go to that gate. The thing is that whenever you do a setup like that, you have to make that in the world somehow. Obviously, there's 101 different tricks, and you rely on the fact that people can't see what's outside of the frame. But one of the things that I particularly liked from the bit of this game that I played is the fact that...
It's a door. No, it's not. Push it. Push it down. Nothing will happen. Come on. Push it. She did it. She did it.
I feel rewarded. You know, I think one of the things that's interesting about games is that to create some kind of an asset, I seem to remember there was a trick with these things where you look past one and it would take you to a different place, but I don't think they've introduced that yet. Anyway, oh, hang on. But yeah, anyways, I think one of the things that's really interesting about games like this, I and I mean, there are other games that do it really well, is they sort of embrace the fact that if you make an asset for, so like, I guess the best I could say is like to set a game in a fantasy setting like this, or a spaceship, I'm going to assume that they're probably roughly the same costs. The spaceship might be a little bit cheaper because you sort of expect them to be very uniform, whereas you sort of expect the world to have sort of, you know, jagged edges and whatnot. But the other nice thing is that once you have those assets, you can really do whatever you want to them. Now, again, all of these lighting effects and all of that are clearly the work of a really talented team spending some time setting those up. But I think one thing that really attracts me to this game quite a bit is they take advantage of a lot of both the interactivity, but also the things that games do very well, without having to rely on a lot of extended cutscenes. And so like this is one of these games where I think it does a good job of telling a story, but I don't get the impression that the people at Ninja Theory like wanted to become movie makers secretly. I could be wrong. I mean, there might be just be an extended cutscene later, and I don't know what their other games are like. But in this one here, I actually think it's not just a good game, but I think it's a good game that works well as a game, that it's not necessarily one where all of the cool bits are relegated to a cutscene that I don't get to, that I don't actually get to experience.
Illusion hides the path to Valravn. Don't trust your eyes. Find another way to see the truth.
All right. Okay, so now that I've got the shimmering look, I bet that portal is going to work now. So this is kind of what I'm talking about here, which is that, you know, if I was setting up as a camera crew, especially if you don't want to do something like this in CG, this is a really hard shot to pull off. But inside of games, I mean, this is the whole reason why you can do Portal, right? Portal doesn't particularly care what the real world can do or not.
We all want to see behind the veil, don't we? But once we do, we mostly just close our eyes again and pretend what we saw was never really there.
And then, of course, you add to it, I mean, on top of it, so on one sense, you have lots of really fun gimmicks and lots of neat visual tricks. I mean, there's definitely, I put a very high premium, whether or not people want to assign some very large significance to what happened. Like, being able to delight me is a really big thing for games for me. So even if it's not necessarily in the service of a grand theme,
Anyone never could close her eyes, however hard she tried. Begged.
every time it says you're in danger, I'm like, where's the fight going to start?
This is the price she pays for seeing things differently. Because once you gaze into the relentless darkness, all that lurks within it can see you too.
Yeah, so for me, like, to just be delighted by something that happened, like, to, you know, see something unexpected, see something funny is, to me, reason enough to kind of include it. But of course, one of the reasons why I've always wanted to get back to this game since I first... Okay. Down to the block. Okay, nice. I gotta get better at those. I'm gonna try practicing blocking a bit. Oh.
Find a good position. Let them surround you. Take him down. Take him down.
Nope, shouldn't have done a heart attack there.
Defend yourself. He's down. Finish it. Finished.
So whenever you do get those well-timed blocks, you feel like $1,000,000.
Will not stop her. She will find what she's looking for.
But yeah, so the point I was trying to say here, because it seems that the tricks are sort of in the service of a really interesting point. Like, there's a few things about where the story goes, which I'll talk about when we get to them. But because it sort of seems to be in the service of sort of a greater whole, it makes me feel it's a lot more rewarding, I suppose is the better way of saying it. All right, I think I remember this.
Power of illusion comes from ravens. Align the ravens to break his magic seal.
Show me what you have seen, Truth.
So like they're lined up like this. I think I have to go higher. But it won't let me hop up there. Oh, but if I go here, this is another thing. I don't think it was Hellblade that was making me more conscious about it, but just the way that they sort of give you little gentle reminders of things that you've learned before.
To break the seal.
I appreciate it, at least because I'm not always the smartest person when I play games. Oop. There we go.
Something's shifted. Something's happened. Something's shifted. Can you feel it?
Do you feel it too? It's like crossing into another world that looks the same but feels different. An imposter world where the forest itself is watching.
Another thing that I didn't really appreciate at the time that I first played it was, so I kind of thought that this was a little bit more of an action game.
Another gate. You know what to do. Stay back. It's not safe. Don't listen to them. Listen, don't.
To break the seal, align the ravens with the mark of Valravan.
Which ravens? Where are they? Can't you see them? Line up the ravens. Shh, 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 shh. What is it?
I hear something.
So this may not be the right place to go. All right.
Follow it, and it will lead you to him. But be aware of his illusions. You can't always trust your eyes.
Challenge me.
He's gone. He disappears. Where did he go?
Yeah, so one of the things when I first set out to play this, I definitely thought that it was more of a I thought it was more of an action game, and I was maybe a little surprised at how sort of the going through the environments and solving the puzzles and all that, how much of that was part of the experience. But I also really like these bits, and I think part of it is just being able. I mean, obviously, they're really good at designing levels, but I really just kind of like walking around in this world.
Is she lost? Wouldn't be the first time. Last winter, before the tragedy, she journeyed into the wilds of her native land, living off berries, roots, and rabbits. It's not uncommon, you see. We call such a person a Gelt. Some, like Truth, become Gelt in search of penance. Others, like Senua, to purge a curse. Those who make it back are forever changed.
She can get up now. She can get up now. What's happening? She can get up now. How can she get up? Must be magic. Dark magic. A trick. Raven. Tricking her. Raven. How can she get up?
Bait.
It's him.
Dark magic draws her closer.
Raven's magic. It's not him. He's helping her. It's not him.
It's a trick.
She's doing it on her own. He's not tricking her. It's magic.
It's an illusion.
So in this particular case here, one of the lessons that I think I was supposed to take out of it, well, not only did we go through the portals, we went through sort of multiple ones to be able to solve sort of a similar puzzle to what we did last time. But they also made sure, because it was a little bit more complex, we had the guide of Valravan himself sort of driving where I'd be walking. So my expectation would be this next one probably takes away that guide. And again, I'm sorry I don't have a lot to say about this, but I don't like talking over the voices, and there's a lot of voices in this game.
We picture fear, and we think of a shadow in the woods, a creature in the night. If only it were that simple. The worst kind comes without warning. A deep, primal signal from within. A reminder that just because you cannot see the threat, it doesn't mean that it's not already here.
Find a way, Senua. Go round. Find your own path. There's a different way.
This seems like there should be a fight here. I'm bad at this.
You're close. They've surrounded.
Oops. So far I've avoided dying in one of the real fights, but I always wind up making stupid mistakes. I'm also not 100% sure what... I think it's the B button. Anyways, the far right button does. I think there's I seem to remember there's some sort of like a superpower or a slow down time button. But I haven't had cause to use it yet, so... Also, again, I'm sorry for... It definitely looks on my end like there's sort of stutters as I'm going through. I'm sort of back into this really weird case where it feels like OBS is now the bottleneck. Actually, tell you what, I'm just going to do something real quick. Yeah, so... It's supposed to be... So I'm supposed to be set up with sort of this NVEC encoding. No, even then, CPU's at like 50%. But yeah, basically ever since I got the new video card, I always seem to like drip down to like 30 to... Or from 30 to 27, 28 frames per second every once in a while. So for instance, I'm seeing that right now. But when I take a look at resource utilization, nothing's really above 60. Anyways, if I keep looking at it, I'm going to get really distracted and annoyed, but I'm going to... I don't know, I guess there isn't really an alternative streaming application. Not one that's free. Maybe I'll just type in all capital letters at the forum and hope for something better. I don't know. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I know some people want everything to be perfection. But this is one of the cases where I actually have no idea what will fix that. So I'm going to go back. I mean, obviously the path has changed. It's not dark and scary anymore. It might just be that I got turned around. I actually think I might have got turned around last time I played. I seem to remember doing like a big circle like last time. No? Oh. I see what I missed. I'm supposed to see the next little lore bit. That's supposed to draw me to it.
The Northmen say that Odin and his brothers killed Ymir, and that the world of men was formed from his corpse. They made his bones into stone, and his flesh into earth, and his blood into the salt sea. They set his skull to be the bowl of the sky, with his brains for clouds. Odin and his brothers caught the sparks flying from Muspel and made them into stars. And to protect the new world from the giants, they used Ymir's great curving eyebrows as walls.
One interesting thing too, the actress who plays Senua, I seem to remember taking a look. I think I did like an IMDb search or something like that. I don't know if this is her first role. It definitely seems like it's her first major role. And if it is, this is a really impressive job. Because I got to see a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff of her in, one of those motion capture suits.
Do you know what it's like to leave everything behind? Your home, loved ones, to head deep into the wilds, perhaps never to return.
And obviously you can just see the...
Senua does. Because when darkness speaks, it changes everything. Turning home into a foreign land and loved ones into strangers. Exile makes sense when you realize that you were never really home in the first place.
Johnny, I believe GOG Galaxy 2.0 is trying to do that. So they basically integrate all of the... Right, I remember. I always liked this touch because you're supposed to find the you're supposed to find the symbol for the door, and then you go in and you see all of these. I always thought that was a really nice touch. But yeah, so I believe GOG, I think GOG is like, so GOG is fighting to, this isn't just me being catty about them. GOG is sort of fighting to become relevant in the current Star Wars. Well, GOG certainly hopes that it's a $1 million idea.
It's over here.
But yeah, if you...
It's over there. No, it's here.
I'll let the voices talk.
Listen, focus. Listen. It's magic. It's magic.
Okay, so I gotta find a way to get that bridge down.
This reminds me of somewhere. The forest. Where? Which forest?
Aha.
Wilds. She went to the wilds a long time ago. Why did she go to the wilds? She wanted to fight her own darkness. She thought she could beat her own. Did she beat her darkness? No. It nearly killed her, but she tried. Druth helped her. If for Druth, she'd be dead. She can't beat her own darkness. She wanted to marry Dillian. She came to beat her own darkness and marry him. But it didn't work. She thought her curse would affect him.
I just want to see if there's any...
It spread to him.
Okay, no.
She thought she'd bring the darkness to him too.
But yeah, so basically, if you take a look at... every once in a while, game developers will do a, hey, Lumpy, how you doing? Great to see you. Actually, while I'm at it, I know there's not too many people in here, but let me just do a quick shout out for my dear friend Johnny Big Time. If you guys are not following him, please do check him out. He's currently doing Death Stranding. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do The Division 2 together. My favorite cast of last year was A Way Out with Johnny Big Time. I am told that we have rather good chemistry on streams. I don't know if that was just because A Way Out is sort of designed to be really good for co-op, or if we work really well. I don't know how many of you actually got to see that that Division stream that we did. But Johnny honestly is one of my favorite people to play games with in general. He's, you know, very good-natured. He's got a great sense of humor, and he has got this natural charisma. So if I'm not streaming particularly well, if I bring him along for the ride, he's usually able to sort of pull me out of the fire. So, and hopefully when we get a few more bodies inside the chat, I will get a chance to sing his praises as well. But I've also been given a little bit of a preview of some... Actually, there's twofold for Johnny. In one sense, there is the stuff that I've gotten to see, you know, sort of what he's planning to do in the next little while for his stream. But on top of that, I don't think I have, unless there's something about this rope that I can work with, I don't think I have the ability to work with this yet. One other thing that's kind of interesting is I've also been able to see some of the things that he's wanted to do with the stream that ultimately didn't get made. And so one of the things I really like talking about with Johnny, I don't want to, you know, take the lid off of anything that he's got planned. But he's someone who I've been able to see sort of firsthand how much effort he puts into his stream and all of the ideas that he has for making it better. And I've always been impressed by that with him. So anyways, I'm just going to take a minute here. We'll get some exposition out of the way.
The Northmen say you must sacrifice in order to receive. They tell how the runes were revealed to Odin only in sacrifice. He hung himself from the world tree, and he stabbed himself with a spear, and he dedicated the sacrifice to himself. For 9 nights he hung on the tree without food or drink, and at last he saw the runes below him. He gave a cry and gathered them in his mind and learnt them. Then he fell from the tree.
Anyways, so the Store Wars. Every once in a while, a developer will give sort of a breakdown in terms of where the revenues came from. And one of the more interesting development, for me at least, one of the more interesting revelations of the last little while has been the fact that with the advent of the Epic Store, it's not necessarily that Epic's eating more of Steam. I actually don't know what those numbers are because, of course, the thing that everybody's mad about Epic for is the fact that they get exclusives, and so the head-to-head competition isn't always a thing. But what I have noticed happen a little bit more often is the fact that Humble is sort of the number 2 position. That GOG has fallen quite a bit, and this is also reflected inside of the, inside of CD Projekt Red's, like the group, the parent company, in terms of their returns. Like there were, I know there were a couple of cases where I feel like there should be a way for me to get down here, and I'm not sure if I'm thinking about this the right way. I think it's just one portal for one effect. And presumably I can just hop off the edge here. No. But yeah, so I mean, again, obviously I'm not gonna gloat over anybody being laid off. But it's, that's a fact of the matter, and I suspect that was probably where the payment issues came through, is that, they're trying to keep as much money in the company as they could. I really would have thought that would turn into a bridge. The game just told me I failed. But with that in mind, the fact that people are getting a little frustrated with multiple storefronts, which I've always found to be a little bit of like false anger. There's a lot of stuff to get mad about. I'm not entirely sure another launcher is really it. I think there's just something else that that's sort of underlying that complaint. But GOG's doing a reasonably smart move in that they're basically trying to set themselves up as the place where you will, the place you'll sort of unify your library. That GOG Galaxy 2.0, which is now currently in beta. I believe anybody who has a GOG account can use it. It's going to combine all of your libraries into one spot. And it sort of helps you out with essentially it's addressing the letter of the complaint that people have with the existence of the Epic Store. Where am I ever going to find all my games now? The thing that Johnny was talking about. That's going to be their position. Now, obviously, they have their work, all their work is ahead of them in terms of how they turn that into, sales. Because the fact of the matter is like their DRM free promise is something that keeps them from having the same version of certain games. So for instance, it's hard for me to recommend Off-World Trading Company on GOG because you can't do multiplayer except with other GOG players, and clearly the player base for Off-World Trading Company on GOG is pretty small compared to Steam. I don't even know if it's free to play on GOG. Oh, I never realized that there weren't roots to this tree before. But I mean, the one thing that GOG will get out of that, and this is really valuable in sort of the modern economy, to use something that makes me sound like an asshole. Obviously, all that all that data, all the telemetry in terms of what people are playing, how long they're playing inside of it. I'm sure there's going to be information in terms of what storefronts they're buying them from, and so whether or not they sell that data to
The Ravens.
They've gone. No, half of them have gone. They've gone.
Some stay here.
But where?
Mel Raven's helping.
He's not helping.
It's a trick. Quiet. Can't think.
Out in the wilds, in cold winter woods,
Where have they gone?
she no longer felt fit for this world. She almost gave in to the darkness.
but yeah, whether they use
Under Dillion's hands, she remembered her promise. She resolved to fight on and kill that which had become a part of her.
But yeah, so basically whether they, I mean, I don't know if they sell the information. That seems kind of a bit of a blunt instrument. But basically, the fact that they have this information in terms of who's playing what platforms they're playing it on. Obviously, they have their own development arm. Now, admittedly, it's, they don't really make a lot of games. They're very well regarded games, but it's certainly... if CD Projekt Red were responsible for all the gaming output, I have a feeling people would be pretty frustrated. So whether they use it for their own operations, whether they use it as an opportunity to try and entice people into, into maybe buying something off of GOG Galaxy, that they're able to position it. I mean, it might even be that they wind up eating the lunch of Razer's service. I'm sure some of you have seen that website like deals.razorzone, where basically they tell you what's on offer. I'm just trying to find where the other one of these... I have a feeling that basically there's something in the... like that area there. So there's clearly another gate where half the ravens go away. And I feel like there's something that should let me walk over the bridge. Let me start at the beginning of the maze again. Oh, hang on. There it is. Anyways, whatever they use it for. I mean, this is not a new story, right? Valve has been able to take advantage of all of the player data from having a very dominant storefront. Sergey Galiokin, who is now responsible for the Epic Store, he had Steam Spy for a long time. And of course, some of the most successful companies today are very good at sort of collecting and or generating data. And so, GOG has actually made a pretty savvy business decision in order to say,
The ravens. They've all gone.
No. There's still three. There's three.
There's three. Where have they gone? God, she didn't.
Looking back, I was so naive to think she could banish it on her own. The further she saw into the darkness, the more she struggled to see anything at all. And the glow, the smallest hints of shape, sound, and thought, grew in strength until they consumed her whole.
but yeah, it's essentially...
Before she knew it, the darkness had her in its claws.
Essentially, they're just kind of admitting that the storefront hasn't worked the way that they wanted it to, and that ultimately they're willing to sort of sacrifice whatever plans they might have had in terms of becoming a Polish Valve or something. And if,
Broken. The gate is open. Open. She did it.
and
There's no such thing as victory when it comes to the darkness. It's like it doesn't want to kill her. Yet. Or nor it biding its time. Only when she is at her weakest will it strike to kill. Will she find Dillion before her time comes?
Right, sorry, I forgot to say that. So deals.Razor Zone, basically Razor has a service that'll let you know when certain games are on sale. And again, that's a really convenient way for them to be able to get you to link into your Steam profiles and all of the other different profiles that you have, and they can get some more information about you as a player. And so, I mean, in the end, too, like, it's not even necessarily that these are bad business models, right? As long as you're willing to give up that information and they're clear in terms of what they're taking it and using it for, you know, it's up to you to decide whether or not the convenience is worth it. But it could be that GOG is deciding to kind of go down that path where they're going to try and eat Razor's lunch on that. But then, of course, you know, we might all wind up with these cloud gaming services, and then it won't necessarily matter. Like, all of the information is going to be held by the platform holders. I'll be quiet and play the game.
Overcome Valravan's final illusion to face him in his keep. I know you can do it, Senua. You have the sight.
We both see the darkness. We can fight it together.
So I think I need to look through a portal to see. Yeah. Oh, yeah, did you get it through the monthly? I'm still not 100% sure about the choice thing. Incidentally, while I'm talking about game business stuff, I might as well get my sales pitch out of the way. I am partnered with not just Epic now, but with Humble as well. So if you use the Humble link down below on the channel, I get a little bit of a portion of the sales if you buy something there. They are actually rather they're rather generous, at least in your first month of the Humble Choice subscription. I think the idea is that I get paid for your first month, and then they just reap the benefits for however many more months you kick around on it. Just trying to get an idea of what changes when I go through there. I think there might be an extra branch.
Speak to me, Druth. Tell me a story.
Senua, listen. I will tell you the tale of a man called Findan. The Northmen captured Findan's sister, and his father sent him to pay for her release. But they took his gold, put him in chains, and held him for a day and a night without food or water. Then they released him. I don't know why. Upon his return, his father's enemies in Erin set fire to his home. His father burnt to death, and his brother was killed. But he escaped with sorrow in his heart. His father's
We're getting rid of that.
redress for his loss and invited him to a feast. It was at a hall near the sea. But when he went there, they betrayed him to the Northmen, who enslaved him and took him to hell. 6 years later, his slave masters landed on the shores of Orkney, burning all before them. And into that fire, Findan made his escape. What was Findan burnt away that day. But from the flames, a new man stepped forward, and Druth was born. Druth. The man that I am now. And though Findan never set eyes on his dear sister again, I, Druth, have found you, Senua.
I wish you could have seen my home before these dark times.
But yeah, the reason I mention it is actually to talk about how generally disappointed I am with the new format. So I didn't use Humble Monthly that much because it was pretty clear to me when the game wasn't necessarily that popular. And my experience of it was like, I think the one that really got me to the point where I was not going to do that subscription service anymore was it was Call of Duty Black Ops 3, and they didn't, it wasn't actually the full game. They offered the multiplayer sort of like starter pack. That was the headline feature of that Humble Monthly, and then you could get like a discounted version of the full game, and it was pretty clear. You could have read that from the you could have read sort of from people's comments on like Reddit and stuff like that, that nobody really thought that was a very good deal. And sure enough, when the time came to sort of see the release for like all the other, like the mystery thing. So it's like basically Loot Crate, the subscription service, for those of you who didn't get to experience the old Humble Monthly. So I guess the question is, do I want to get rid of this branch? Because it feels like this branch is more helpful than anything. Yeah, so like basically there was like nothing really that remarkable in that bundle, if I remember correctly. Like it was definitely one of these ones where I felt like it was not worth it, and it seemed to me that basically they really had trouble generating enough money for that particular monthly to be able to get anything else. And I've gotten the impression that they've really been struggling with sort of the random nature that I think they can always do the saying, you got $300 worth of games. But like when people take a look at them, they're like, yeah, but it's $300 worth of games that I never would have spent anything even remotely close to that much on. And so I think they were really struggling to sort of demonstrate the value of their, nope, can't do that. I think they were struggling to demonstrate the value of the bundles that they were doing. And so as a result, my suspicion is that they went to this, they originally went to one where they would like show you two. All right, so I got to clear this debris. So maybe there is an explicit choice I need to make between the debris and the beam. But yeah, you can sort of see how they tried out. Yeah, that's fine. You could sort of see, with increasing the number of early reveals and whatnot, it's pretty clear that they were feeling that being able to show people what they were getting was the way to sort of get more people to sign on. And now effectively what they've done is they've done this Humble Choice system. If you were in the old Humble Monthly, it's actually not a bad deal in the sense that, per game, what you're getting is the lowest that you can get in that program, I think. Oop. Careful. But I also sort of think like one of the drawbacks that this new system has run into is that people sort of feel
The gate is open.
It's darkness. I know it from the wilds. It's coming back for me. I'm still here. Are you too? Where are we? I remember. It didn't end well in the wilds. It never does.
You think you can overcome the darkness, make sense of it, and once relief settles in, strikes out of nowhere, throwing you helplessly back into the maelstrom, drowning the mind in fear, deeper, deeper, dragging you down so far into the void that maybe this time there is no coming back. But there, in the darkness,
Senua,
and she remembered what he told her.
hear me. Reach out to me. Senua, take my iron mirror. Look into it, for it is a window into the underworld. Within, you will see the face of the darkness that you fear. And if you focus, like I have taught you to, you will also see that as much as the darkness has you trapped within its veil, it too is trapped within yours. Focus. Focus! Focus!
I see you. I see you now. You led me to the wilds. You trapped me there.
Oh. Well, I guess I know what that button does now.
Don't let them get behind you. Keep them inside. He's got behind you. We're winning.
Oof. Alright, that's not great.
Where's he going? Pride. It's not over yet.
I always really like the fact that in this fight, you basically had to rely on a lot of quick attacks against sort of what is obviously a trickster god.
They're overwhelming. She's gonna lose. You finished it. Use your sword, Tom. Use your strength. You can do it. You can do it.
What? Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button.
Get up quickly. She's injured. She can still do it.
What the? I was pushing the left bumper, not the right. Oh, and okay, here we go. But yeah, basically, because you're against a trickster god, you rely a little bit more on light attacks right around the time that I try to do an ineffective heavy.
It's nearly over. Finish.
Run after him, you fool! Alright, that. Yeah, I can't do heavy attacks. Not unless he's stunned.
Go.
Hmm.
Die.
That was more of a panic special. Yeah. Keeps telling me to evade too.
Beat him. Beat him. She's nearly there. She's hurt. There's blood.
Drat. Ah!
It's not over. It's not over. She can do it. Going too slow.
Once I get used to hitting the left bumper, it's really hard to get back into proper block mode. Let me try and train myself on that again. Okay.
Go! Fight again. Spill their blood. Don't let them surround you. Quick behind you.
Damn it.
So we can see your lead. Behind you. Behind you. Finish this. End it now. Focus. Focus now.
Oh, wrong folk. Oh no. I don't know if that's the focus that we're talking about, but... God damn it.
Focus! Focus now! I never beat you in the wilds, did I? It was an illusion. But not this time!
The mark of Valravan. One of the keys to the gate to Helheim. Hold it in your mind's eye.
With every battle, the darkness grows stronger. Every victory bringing her closer to defeat. Unfair, isn't it? In those dark winter nights in the wilds, there were times when she considered letting go. If it weren't for Druth, a chance encounter in the wilds, she would not have heard his stories of the Northmen. And she would not have this chance to find Dillion's soul.
I'm coming. I still hear you.
I think one thing I really like about that particular boss fight is compared to some of the... So, like, if I was talking a little bit before about how I was expecting this to be a bit more of an action-oriented game, and that, you know, so much of the...
When she was younger, she would lay in the grass and stare at the clouds. And then she saw them. Elusive. Shifting faces. After a while, she could see the faces everywhere. The trees, the mountains, caves.
But yeah, basically, so much of the gameplay has been working through these portals. I mean, it's all obviously sort of on brand for a trickster like Valravan. But what, to my mind at least, one of the things that makes that fight so good is if you think about the amount of time that you've had not doing a fight like that, or not really doing any kind of combat for the majority of the time, and then it's one where you really feel like you need to bring everything. It's a nice long fight with...
Can you see the faces too? They're there. If you look for them.
Oh, I think there's a... I think if you find a face, you're supposed to... Yeah.
Mother? Senua, you have the sight. Just like I do. Once you can see into the underworld and all the souls within it will see you. Don't be afraid when they speak to you. I will always be here to guide you.
Did you see her? That was her mother, Galena. She was a priestess, a healer. She taught Senua to see the weave that binds the world together. And it was beautiful. It was a time before the darkness. But when it did come, it first came for her mother. Senua still sees her face from time to time, hidden in the world. Like she's still watching over her. She misses her so much.
But yeah, so basically, sort of the restraint in terms of the fights, and then giving you something where you really sort of feel that you need to bring everything to bear to get past it, makes that a particularly satisfying fight. And just little things too, like having to learn the patterns and the different phases and whatnot. Obviously, I wasn't doing my best. Sometimes because I didn't quite 100% remember the control scheme. The biggest challenge, I seem to remember this is the problem that I had when I first played this too, is that knowing the difference between, I'm pretty sure it's the bumper is the top one and the trigger is the bottom one. Anyways, the little buttons at the top of the controller. I don't normally play games with controllers. But for some reason, once I start doing running attacks, I am almost certainly there's going to be a fight in here because it's all dark. Nope, maybe not. Well, that's what I get for running.
It's not over. It's not over. Defend yourself.
What am I doing?
Quickly get up. She's hurt. She's injured. She won't make it. She will die. Stop. Get out of the way! Go.
Oops. God.
End it now. This is nearly the end. You won it.
I'm still not sure I know how to handle the shield, guys, but
She needs to go back. She can't. It won't open. Why won't it open? Why won't it open?
There's another challenge.
She hasn't challenged Sarah.
The Northmen say that in the beginning there was nothing but darkness. Bitter cold to the north, fiery hot to the south. They say the cold formed ice, which melted.
Okay, we did hear
from
this
sparks
before.
from the south. The power of the darkness gave life to the dripping ice, and the first giant was born, and was named Ymir. The ice continued to drip, and the power of the void gave life to it, and it became a cow whose milk fed the giant. That's right, a cow. But you weren't expecting that. Surt, the fire giant, has answered. He comes from a land older than mankind, and the Northmen call upon his flaming sword to raise their enemies to the ground. Find him, Senua, and spill his blood.
As an aside, back to the Valravan fight. One of the things I've never been quite clear on.
A wretched old fool on her way back from the wilds. An outcast. Was badly burnt all over. She took pity on him, for he was not long with this world. Like her, he spoke of his own darkness. The Northman.
Senua, we each walk these lands gazing towards different horizons, some of us further than others. Your father cannot see what you see, but there is nothing wrong with seeing the world the way you do.
What was I going to say? I was never clear whether or not that story was supposed to communicate that Senua was actually the sister, because she talks about the destroyed house, or if it was just meant that she's sort of become a replacement for the sister. Because you can sort of read it both ways, right? That can't quite. Can't remember the original. Anyways, the subject of the story, who turns out to be this character you've known all along. The original name is dead at the point that he meets Senua. So he says that person never met his sister again, but I found you, Senua. And so I'm never sure if that's supposed to mean that Senua is the sister and that he simply met her. God damn it.
Can't do it. End it. There are too many of them.
Anyway, yeah. So the character that the story is about, to the narrator, is dead at the time that he meets Senua, allowing her to be the sister or just someone he's met.
The sweet, sickly stench of burning human flesh. And I still hear their cries carried in the wind. Do you hear them too, Senua?
Yes, I heard their screams, and I still hear them now.
So I feel like there's some kind of a possibility here with the crosses, or well, kind of what passes for a cross. Oh, yeah.
Are they screaming? You can hear the rooms.
One of the things that's so funny about this one is you'd think that diagonals are really easy to find in an environment like this. Sorry, Johnny, don't bother installing this from Humble. This game is for smart people. Nope.
You can hear the rooms.
I don't know if I'm supposed to reactivate this. It's definitely not showing up again. Anyways.
What's that sound? Screaming. Are they screaming? Follow the screams.
So it kind of feels like that might meet it, but there's like there isn't the last bit of the stick, so. So. Yeah, here we go.
The path to Helheim is sealed to the living, but you already walk amongst the dead. Look towards the gate, and you will see that it has opened. When they first came to my lands, I knew enough of their tongue to beg for mercy, and they took me as a slave. I wish now that they had slaughtered me like the others. I rode their storm of fire, death, and slavery to many lands. This darkness you speak of, I know it well.
And I'm still here to fight it.
It's hurt, there's blood.
Good lord. Wrong button again. Alright. I'm going to try to avoid using the super until I can really pull it off. If nothing else, if I can focus on the, nope.
Get up quick!
She can still do it.
Sometimes you just gotta cheat.
Behind you.
was not the right move.
Slow.
Quickly get up! They're coming! She's hurt. She won't make it.
Oh, I didn't mean to hit that. I will make the most of it.
He's gone!
So I don't know.
See a fire gate of Surt. Know that only a sacrifice will stoke the fires of Muspel, and let the dead walk through. Find the fire, Senua, to follow the path to Surt.
I don't quite know how the auto difficulty works, but I will definitely say I've liked the fact that I feel challenged, but obviously I have, excuse me, told me to focus. Anyways, I like the fact that I feel challenged enough to, you know, that I'm invested in it, but I don't, like, obviously I haven't died that much inside the game. So, once it says the difficulty, can you change it if you find it too hard, easy? Yeah. So, I think if you go under, yeah, here it's set to auto. Ah. Silly me for thinking that walking on fire would be bad for my health.
Hell will not give you the answers you want. But you mustn't look away from the horrors it does offer. Because you cannot overcome suffering if you refuse to look at it.
And I'm also hoping they don't do something dirty. Okay, so this is an example about... Oh,
Where's the fire gone? Where's it gone? The fire's disappeared. It was everywhere. Maybe it was an illusion. It was a trick. Maybe it the fire. Cert is through there. He's waiting for her. You can't get through. How will she get through?
She'll need to find another way.
Truth and scent. Find your own path.
There's always another way.
There's always a way.
Find your own way.
You just have to find it. Waiting for you. It was never going to be that easy. He's waiting.
Scent is waiting for you.
Find him. The
before I get to more narration, I was going to say, this is one of the many reasons why I should never work in games. I would, especially if there's some kind... Like, I wonder if there's a way you can set it up so that you detect if there's a streaming program running. Or maybe you just get to do some sort of Twitch integration or something like that. You do an automatic difficulty setting, and at the very end of the game, it says, you know, auto difficulty was calibrated to very easy at the end. I'm hoping a game like this doesn't do that.
The Northmen say that the defender of Muspel is called Surt, the foremost of the fire giants. His name means the Black One, because he is like something burnt. The Northmen believe that he sits at the border of Muspel with his flaming sword, and at the end of the world he will leave his post. He will travel to Asgard and Midgard, waging war against all the gods. He will be victorious, and then burn the whole world with fire.
I think probably I'm going to have to leave most of the stuff I wanted to say about the game to another...
Another fire sacrifice.
gonna have to leave it to another another stream. It's mostly with the ideas of apocalypse,
It's
but
too far. She'll never find it. She'll never make her way back. She needs to remember the way back.
What happens
Oh.
when she finds it?
Everything will burn.
Concentrate on where you're going. She needs to remember the path.
Everything will burn. Then how will she find the way back?
She won't. She won't be able to tell.
The Northmen believe that the world will be destroyed someday. They call it Ragnarok, the destiny of the gods. Asgard will be attacked by Surt and the fire giants. A monstrous wolf will swallow the sun, and the gods will fight in vain against their enemies. There is nothing they can do to prevent it, but Odin ever seeks knowledge and magic, hoping to find a way to postpone that dark day.
this is neat. Obviously,
Northmen did fire sacrifices, burning slaves like me to reveal the path to Surt. I searched for meaning in their suffering, in their eyes, but they just screamed like helpless pigs.
what I like is, I mean, obviously, just everything about this game in terms of the atmosphere is wonderful, right? Like seeing the little flashes, the little embers as you're walking by. You obviously know what's coming up. And it even tells you as you're walking in, is like, you know, you're going to have to find your way back out of this. Like as a player, you know everything that's about to happen. But kind of walking your way around, I always get this feeling it's kind of like, oh, do I know how I'm going to get my way out? I don't think I've died in this spot before, but I always know it's rather hair-raising. Yeah, Johnny, that's exactly what I want. That wasn't so bad. I really do love how they go to a kind of a handheld camera feeling on this, though. Like, it's one of these ones where it makes...
Do your gods answer your prayers, Senua? I asked the gods for mercy, all of them, even theirs. None answered. In the end, I set myself free. Defy the gods, Senua! Find your own path, like I find mine!
My gods abandoned me. I am alone.
It makes absolutely no sense for there to be handheld and camera game. There's handheld cameras in games. There's nobody holding a camera, but it's obviously something that we've gotten so used to in, in the other visual media that we see, that it's a really effective. It's a really effective convention. Like obviously, you feel like the place is on fire, and you need to run out when the camera starts bouncing around like the person who's been kind of following you and recording you the whole time. Yeah, I've always been like, because the character models are
worship the devourers, insatiable gods of darkness. I come from Erin, Senua, where I once followed my own gods, the Tuatha De Danann.
Why did you abandon your gods?
Senua, I was a man of knowledge, not a warrior. To survive, I did things. Bad things. Like you, Senua. The man I once was has died. And when that happens, even gods you worship can die with you.
So yeah, like obviously the character model and the the animation is really good in this, and so I was wondering if the live action bits were just because like it was just that because they were like they had this very stylized look that I was mistaking them for live action, but it's really clear that it is. The longer you look at Druth, the clearer that it is that. But
The Northmen say that at Ragnarok, the sons of Muspel will travel to battle in the ship called Naglfar, the corpse ship. And when the sons of Muspel leave the ship and ride to battle, it will be as though the sky had split open, and Surt will lead them. Wherever he goes, flame will erupt before him, and fires will burn behind him.
there's a side of me that thinks the R is supposed to be in this play. I definitely feel like a roof is the most likely candidate for an R shape. And the fact that this symbol is showing up here, I gotta. They wouldn't put a second story on this thing unless I was supposed to go up to it, though, right? What was I saying? I don't remember. This is one of the challenges that I have streaming a game like this, is that it does a very good job on its own. It doesn't require my extra commentary, and anything I have to say probably isn't that interesting. So I have lots of half-finished thoughts. Game is for smart people. Okay, so apparently something here is supposed to... Oh, yes. Neat. That's a really arcane one. One of the things I will say for this, I do rather like, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think the historical / fantasy setting works so well for it. I do like the fact that it is somewhat ambiguous as to whether or not the voices are on your side or not, because obviously they do help you in the combat. But also just the simple fact that, in terms of this game, you are someone who sees differently, and one in the sense of, the idea of shamans or other people who very well could be suffering some kind of mental health problem, but being treated differently in the society, but also just through the fact that you're looking for the patterns. And I mean, in one sense too, like you could almost imagine a conspiracy game built around a very similar mechanic to the runes here, right? Where you're looking for these patterns that don't exist. But obviously in this context, it definitely has a very personal and a very kind of very arcane meaning, which is revealed through the I don't know where the exit is. I should probably find that before I set the world on fire. I'm assuming it's, yeah. No, I'm not getting out of there.
It's nearly over. Finish. Don't let them surround you. Watch out! Watch out! He's stronger than you.
You say your world has collapsed. Good. Let it collapse, and have the courage to shed your tears. Raise your world to the ground!
My world is dead.
Only then, as with a newborn, will you see the world anew.
No. I see nothing now.
All right, so this is some of the stuff I wanted to talk about. I remembered that little bit of a video pretty well, because it's one of the things that I feel. So the subject of the end of the world is really popular in a lot of games, right? You've got Surviving the Aftermath, you've gotten, Fallout, and everybody knows the term for these types of games, right? Post-apocalyptic. And yet, one of the things that I've always sort of felt has been a very rich vein that I think developers could tap is specifically the idea of apocalypse. And I mean, this actually comes a bit to the things. Cultist Simulator does this quite well.
Tell me true. How did you escape your darkness?
Senua, once I found my purpose, I was no longer enslaved to the suffering I had to endure to reach it. Unclouded by fear, I could see it clearly in others. Even my captors feared the fire of Cirth. And so, during one raid, I took my chance and ran, knowing that they would not follow. A fool ran into the fire. They left me for dead. Maybe they were right to. But here I am. Free.
I'm glad I found you in the wilds. I wouldn't have made it without you.
Is it really supposed to be the flag? I think that's right. But anyways, so apocalyptic literature is a thing, and it's probably most famous through books of the Bible. The Book of Revelation being a really famous example, but not the only one. The Book of Daniel has it as well, and the thing is that it's not wrong to talk about it in the sense of the end of that is what apocalyptic literature is. It deals specifically with the end of things, but in some ways, actually, the heavy metal covers that get inspired by it probably wind up being a little bit truer to the source material than some of the interpretations. So probably the least satisfying way of looking at works like that would be some sort of instruction manual. I think some sort of instruction manual for what the end of the world looks like. So people who are looking for the Antichrist. I can't get away with like this trick again, can I? They're going to be waiting a really long time for that. Or who knows, right? But I would not. That would not be where I place my bets. And I mean, when you think of it like the Book of Revelation, a revelation of something, and the opening lines, the revelation of St. John, it is this very poetic, very intense type of literature that's trying to communicate the sorts of things that you normally expect from poetry. Which is again why I say the the instruction manual version of it. So the sort of like left behind perspective. Come on, just give me the. Is a really not very satisfying way of looking at it. And so inside the context of this game, we all sort of know about Ragnarok. That I think is sort of well known enough that it probably the concept of Ragnarok doesn't come as news to anyone who's playing the game. Although I don't know, right? Like sometimes maybe I'm wrong in assuming that people are familiar with. Like I have this really unhelpful habit where I assume that because it's the wrong side, so maybe there's a reflection, or not a reflection, like a shaft of light somewhere. Yeah, I've got at least a half hour left in me. If I can get to the other bit. Okay, I'll wait for a little. I'll try and finish the thought. I mean, the problem is I don't have a particularly articulate way of expressing this idea, but I think one of the things that's so interesting about this, and I feel other games can sort of get to this material. Yeah, I got to go on the other side. Other games can get to this material quite easily if they only bother to look. But we're familiar with Ragnarok. We're familiar with stories of the end of the world. It's that is a genre that's never going to go out of style. But particularly in the context here, on the journey that you've gone through, and the person who's talking to you, and the idea of bring your world down. This very personal event, and especially in the context of all of the other, I mean, again, it's like to a certain extent, the fact that it talks about mental health right up at the front sort of gives you a framing in terms of how you're supposed to be thinking about these things. To me, this is one of the reasons why this story kind of is so gripping to me. Because like on its own, in terms of trying to get some exact sense as far as an exact sequence of events that's going on, I probably couldn't tell you a lot about what's going on. I certainly know that Senua is going on some kind of a quest to do something, and I have something of a guess that this might be Druth's head. I'm gonna come up short in terms of trying to sit down and tell someone, explain it to me like I'm 5. I'm probably not going to be able to do that. But this building up to an event of tremendous significance, and this association of both the legends of the end of the world as understood by the Norse, as well as this idea of Senua, who's clearly been through a lot and has a very unique way of looking at the world that you get to sort of come along for the ride with as a player, if not outright control. Definitely gives a certain potency that I think is sometimes missing. Like one of the problems I think that sometimes comes up with apocalyptic settings is that effectively it becomes a theme park. That it's like all of the rules are gone, and it turns out that a Hobbesian world actually kind of kicks ass because I am the player and I'm allowed to do whatever I want, and I know that the game designer has built things in a way that I'm going to be able to overcome most of the stuff that I run into. Whereas, of course, if we were to face the breakdown of society, I know I would basically be, robbed within the first 15 minutes and left for dead. And so this, I think, is one of the reasons why number one, obviously, when you start talking about the end of the world, when you talk about when you have apocalyptic imagery in a fantasy setting, it's already a little bit more interesting, just because I think we generally associate fantasy settings with things just being sort of grim and difficult all around. But on top of that, again, if you consider this apocalypse as, again, a very personal event, the fact that you are clearly, like, we're seeing very supernatural things. We're seeing the world on fire around us, and we're surviving things that probably normal people shouldn't be surviving. This is sort of tapping into some of the more interesting ways that these have been portrayed. And so, again, this isn't a knock on anything like Fallout or whatever. I know people really like those games and that. But I think for its scarcity, the way that this game sort of uses apocalyptic imagery, and particularly in sort of the context of the overall story that it wants to tell and some of the themes that it wants to tackle, I think it makes it a lot more effective.
The Northmen say that what we see as a rainbow is the bridge that goes from the world of men to the world of the gods. For now, they say the frost giants and the mountain giants cannot cross it. But they say that when Ragnarok comes, not a thing in this world will be safe. The rainbow bridge will break under the onslaught of the fire giants riding on flaming steeds. Senua, I have seen fire assert spread far and wide, and to our lands. Ragnarok is coming.
Incidentally, do any of you guys have examples of games that handle the end of things the way that Senua's Sacrifice or Cult of Simulator does? I know I haven't talked a lot about Cult of Simulator, but again, and that, I mean, that one has endings where you wound up devoured, so... Thought I wanted me to look at something.
Senua, if I can survive the fire of Surt and escape my darkness, then so can you. Run through the fire. Keep running. Go on. Nothing will stop me. Run, Senua. Run. Through the fire.
She's dying.
It's him. It's him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This darkness takes everything. Everyone.
Senua, are you sure you want to do this? We can fight this together, side by side. We always do.
This is my battle. I have to face it alone, away from here.
Where will you go?
I don't know.
For how long?
I don't know.
I believe in you. You know that. Just promise me that you will come back to me. I want you to say it. I want you to say it.
I will come back to you. I promise.
So again, the feeling of this fight is entirely different from the... Yikes. In contrast to the Trickster, like, this is one where you're rewarded for doing these big, bold hits, and you... Generally, you can't afford to block anything that this guy does. And I think you could probably see it just visually in terms of it as well.
For every battle won, a greater battle takes its place. And so it goes. Until we fall. And in the end, we all fall. Even the gods have their time. Yet we still go on. Why?
I made a promise, and I will go to hell to keep
I
it.
die free, knowing you will carry my stories with you. I have fulfilled my quest.
Yes, you have.
When the darkness comes, I vow to guide you in this life and the next to fulfill yours.
Then I will see you in hell.
Be ready to face horror in the eye, as I have. To find your answers. Your quest. Your truth.
So yeah, I was just saying that the fights just feel really different. You go against the Trickster, you need to use a lot of fast attacks, you need to dodge, and you have the chance of blocking some of the...
Truth was a troubled man. Scholar turned slave. They tortured him. Took him with them on their raids. Drove him to madness. Spreading this new form of darkness to new worlds. To my world.
And then that last fight, again, very anchored, very, very heavy. It's a lot of fun. Definitely felt a lot easier. I don't know if that's because the game is adjusted because I suck, or... The one thing I didn't quite get was when he set on fire. I mean, it was telling me to focus, but I thought it was because I was hurt.
Saw a deep connection form between the Northmen and the darkness. If his tales of hell were true, then that was the source of it. She learned everything she could from him, until she too could see what he saw.
I should take a minute too. One of the things I neglected to say about the runes. I mean, again, a very experienced studio doing a passion project is sort of reason enough to see why. Actually, I don't think I'm supposed to be going here. Is reason enough to have a really beautiful environment. But if you can contrast this with some of the really old adventure games, and one of the challenges that I have in terms of like really getting into them is that because they're very pixelated, sometimes objects that you need to pick up to solve a puzzle later on inside of the game are higher resolution than everything else in the area. And so, you know, you kind of want to immerse yourself in this world. Like, pixel art is not necessarily something that doesn't allow you to sort of immerse yourself inside of the game. It's a little bit like watching a black and white film. You know, you can still get really drawn into a black and white movie. For instance, I know Johnny Big Time's favorite movie of all time is Casablanca. Yeah, but I mean, like, clearly people have been very compelled by images that don't really look like what they're used to seeing. And so for some of those adventure games, I don't find it a problem that they're pixelated. Ammunition has wonderful emotes.
Have you ever died before? It's a serious question. When the illusion of self is shattered, you simply cease to be. Though it may not seem that way to others, you know when it is true. You can feel it. A stranger in your own body. An imposter. And nothing is the same ever again. Senua has died before. And she will do so again. You can be sure of that.
So to this particular line as well, I mean, again, we were talking a little bit before about sort of ideas of apocalypse and the end of things and that. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I'll try and get back to the other point I was going to make about adventure games and some of the puzzles inside of this one. But one movie that I think it doesn't quite exactly touch on the same theme. Maybe, I mean, I should probably reserve this evaluation for when the game is done. But for some of you, you may have seen a movie. It's an older one. It's actually a pretty old one called Jacob's Ladder. It stars Tim Robbins. And there's this really wonderful scene with his masseuse. He plays sort of a Vietnam War veteran. Oh, no, sorry, it's not a masseuse, chiropractor. So he's meeting with his chiropractor. His chiropractor is something of a philosophical bent. And he talks about Meister Eckhart and this idea that there is no difference between angels and demons, that it is ultimately the individual, how they have lived their life, and that the things that come to take you from this world on death, if you have lived a life, presumably this is a life of sin, but if you have lived a life that keeps you very attached to the world, the mortal plane, then the thing that comes to take you away from that is a demon that is going to take you away from this thing that you have invested a lot into. Whereas if you've lived what is presumably a virtuous life, one that is more concerned with, you know, either the world beyond or spiritual matters, then these are angels coming to take you up from heaven. Take you up to heaven. And obviously there's particularly that passage about the idea of Senua dying before. But even then, the idea, some ideas earlier as well about everything sort of being burned down and rebuilt. The idea that it's a very personal event, that it's I don't want to say just a matter of perspective, because that kind of, I think that sort of cheapens it a little bit. But that's an example of a movie that I think is sort of touching on some of the same ideas.
The Northmen tell this story. Before the earth was created, there was a world called Muspel. Because it was in the south, it was bright and hot, flaming, burning. Sparks that flew out from Muspel became the stars. Other sparks melted ice in the frozen world of Niflheim, creating the body of the
I did
giant Ymir.
hear this one.
Muspel is one of the 9 worlds, and is now the land of the fire giants.
Huh. I didn't know that it would get so quiet. Anyways, so talking about sort of people's recognition of images, one of the drawbacks, in terms of my immersion at least for these adventure games, is that you know something is important to the story because it is higher resolution than the other items in the environment. And so it's the consistency that sells the game and the environments to me.
The mark of Valravan and the mark of Certain, you may cross the bridge over the River of Knives to Helheim.
So when this game presents me with the runes, like I said, why do you want to have beautiful environments? Because, it's 2020 and we all have good computers and this is beautiful to look at and I want to go around worlds like this. But if you consider the idea of the puzzles, the fact that you're trying to look for certain objects in the environment and they're supposed to be ones that, again, they're not necessarily obvious. Obviously, I've kind of struggled a little bit with a few of these to, find the right shape. Other ones, I sort of know the shape that I'm looking for, and I just need to make the game realize that I really did find it, that I'm not going on a fishing expedition. But clearly, a game with less visual fidelity isn't necessarily going to be able to pull off that kind of a puzzle as credibly. It clearly can be done, and it has been done. But I think one of the things that really contrasts this from some of the other adventure games that sometimes pull me out of their stories when they give a puzzle like that, it's because there's a big signpost just from the limits of the technology. And so this one, in addition to the fact that it's just a beautiful looking game, and as we talked about the concept of triple I at the beginning, like that's probably the reason it looks like this. But on the other hand, they're able to sort of wring out every last little benefit from something like this, sort of environments that are so pleasant to walk around and, just look very natural. They're able to do these, look closer, focus kind of puzzles in a better way than they would if it was, if it was done with the sort of budget you would normally associate with a studio sort of self-publishing. Oh.
Why is she waiting? Open the gate. Open the gate. No, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Don't open the gate. Don't. She's done it. It's so dark. It's dark. The dark. Only the dead may cross. Only the dead may cross into hell.
Truth? Anyone?
There is no one here but me.
Not you.
Did you think that I would let you go? That you lost me back in the wilds? I will never let you go. You can't get rid of me. I am your shadow. And I will be watching when you draw your last dying gasp.
I'm not ready to die.
You will be when you see what they did to your dear beloved.
Damien!
In this waking nightmare, where all dreams come true, you searched for control, a way to pull through. When you were in love, you left him in tears, to smother your furies and banish your fears. But in darkness they came, through stormy black seas they raided these shores. Do you still hear his screams? And now that you're home, he's so far away. they've taken his soul. To these gods you cannot pray. They can break you, but not your promise. Even death won't keep you apart. Through his darkness you will find him. In your sword still beats a heart. You fought for love unspoilt by your darkness within. You fought for your dreams. Now there's no way to win. In the head of his corpse lies the seat of his soul. So you must carry his vessel to bring him back home.
No!
They can break you, but not your promise. Even death won't keep you apart. Through this darkness you will find him. In your sword still beats a heart. The darkness touched you. Everyone could see it in the hollows of your eyes. A gaze averted from life. You ran from it but brought it nearer. Led it to him. An endless suffering worse than death. And you wanted to surrender. Abandoning to find peace with the gods. No. The darkness won't allow it. So you will walk into the lair of the beast. Look it in the eye, and you will go to war. This is your mission. This is your quest. There is nothing else left.
This is normally the time that I would finish, but after a cutscene like that, I definitely think I need to do a little bit more.
The gods made you a warrior for a reason. It's your calling.
Defend yourself!
Why suffer the past when there is a new road ahead? The only one that makes any sense.
They're winning! Finish him!
I'm really happy I was able to Sparta that at the end.
Every gate you open into darkness brings another challenge.
Quickly get up! She's injured. She can still do it. She's injured. She's not gonna make it.
Oof. Whoa! This guy is no joke.
She won't make it.
Take him down.
She will die.
Behind you. Watch out. Get up quickly. Get up.
It's not over. It's not over.
She can still do it.
Did I get knocked down again? I think I'm gonna have to focus.
Get out of the way. Finish this.
Incidentally, another thing I love about this is how they don't need health bars. You're able to sort of see the damage on the enemies based on just the number of wounds that they've taken. It's actually really impressive how little they kind of need to tell you to be able to communicate what's important.
He's down. Finish it. Finish it. Strike him.
The journey to Helheim is never a straight one. Each must find their own path. Align yourself to its secrets, and you will find yours. However you come to the gold-covered bridge that leads to Hell, you may find it guarded by a giantess. She will ask your name. She will ask your lineage. She will ask your business. The Northmen tell of the warrior woman Brynhild, who leapt into fire and rode to Hell to join her slain love Sigurd, and is challenged by the giantess.
I feel like there should be an X somewhere in like the wreckage, but it's usually pretty explicit when... Okay, that's got to be the... Should probably get higher. That X has got to be up higher. Oh, no, this is where the S is supposed to be. All right. I really feel like that one should be it. And it's just a question of where I... and obviously there's X's everywhere, but it's probably wants a really explicit looking one. Yeah, there it is. Oh, heh. Oh, I wonder if it's supposed to be the same... So I'm looking at the same object just from different sides. I particularly like that when they're talking about, you know, again, finding your own ways for things. Let's run with the hypothesis that we do, and it's just a matter of what angle I see it from. Again, usually it just explodes with a bunch of colors if I found it. Okay. Yeah, that's neat, especially when they're talking about sort of your personal path to hell. And I was wrong. It is not Druth's head. It is the other gentleman. And again, I'm really bad at remembering the names. I feel terrible.
Hela possesses large dwelling places in Helheim. Tall are her walls, high are her gates. The name of her dish is hunger. Her knife is famine. On her threshold all will stumble. Her bed is called sick bed, and her bed hangings are called flames of a funeral pyre. They say she is easy to recognize, half black and half the color of flesh, and her face menacing and grim.
The only real reason I went through this door is to see if another one of these little lore bits was there. So I'm gonna have to consider wrapping up reasonably soon, but we'll see if there's a good natural breaking point. Again, I'm loving these environments.
It's coming.
That song again.
Is it?
It's Hela.
Yes, the source of the darkness. It's coming. This is your moment.
I'm sorry. I can't watch this.
What are you doing? You're showing weakness. You're not a warrior. You're a disgrace. The gods will punish you for this. Pick up the sword. Pick it up. Fight the darkness. Fight it. Get up. Get up. Get up and fight.
Stormy seas and lost souls. She's dreamt of this before. They say dreams are visions of our memories, thoughts, and fears, as seen by our inner eye. But what if each one of us is always dreaming, even when awake, and we only see what our inner eye creates for us? Is this what hell is? A world shaped by Senua's nightmares. Maybe that's why people feared seeing the world through her eyes. Because if you believe that Senua's reality is twisted, you must accept that yours might be too.
You failed the gods. You're pathetic. Rotten. Cursed. What were you thinking? Did you really think you could win? How stupid can you be?
So stupid.
Everyone hates her. She's cursed.
The shadow hates.
Look at you. A warrior. Worthless. Weak. Pathetic. Go on. Feel sorry for yourself, because there is no one left to do that for you.
Everywhere. You failed. What's that?
Take it. If you're too much of a coward to fight, then end the suffering. Broken and lost. Just like your sword.
Come on. Dare.
Why go on when you give everything and face that which torments you, only to find that it is worse than you could have imagined? Why go on? Is it really so weak to ask this? Or are we just so afraid of the honest answer that we do not dare pose the question? Sometimes the answer lies in a memory, a feeling, a song.
It's not real. It's a trick. It's not real. Listen to it. She
Don't give up.
Did it? It's
Not like this.
It's not real. It is real. It's a trick. Don't trust it. Maybe you're already dead.
Who are you?
Do you still believe in yourself?
No, it's not. It's a trick. She knows this. It's a trick. He's already dead. He can't be here. It's impossible.
Come to me. Please.
The light. Go towards the light. It's him. There he is. It can't be him. It's just a trick. It's in your mind. No, he's here. It's in your mind. It's real. It's happening. Go towards it.
I was gonna leave it there, but I kind of want to see how this turns out, so I'll go a little bit longer. I loved that reveal about the owner of that voice.
There it is. You're imagining things. It's Dylan. He's gone. You would go slow. How could you? Keep going. How could you? Keep going. Ignore the pain. I told you it was he tricked you. I told you. Where are you going? Up. See, there's nothing to follow. Come on.
That's really interesting. If you push yourself too hard in this state, it holds you back. It's really clear in the fights that if you've got too much damage, you move a lot slower. And one thing that I really like about that is it motivates the use of the super.
Before she first met him, she was not in a good place. Just a teenager, but not like the others. Barely functioning, she rarely left the house. Her father's in-bell made sure of that. Only occasionally did she venture out on her own, collecting firewood and herbs. Errands out in the Orkney Plains. That was her world. Like this one. Barren and lonely.
But yeah, it's really apparent when you've taken a lot of damage, you move very sluggishly. And one thing I like about that is it motivates the use of the of sort of the focus. Again, it's just this problem that I always run into with games, and I think this is just kind of generally known about players in general. Generally known about in general. Well said. I think this is the thing about players in general is that they tend not to use consumables because most people are risk averse.
It's already disappeared. Nothing lives here, not even you. It's in your mind. You think you can see it, but it's in your mind.
So even if you want to preserve your focus because you...
There he was. The lone figure of a boy.
He's there, under the tree.
Sword play under the shade of a tree.
You have to
She remembers the first time she saw him. To her young eyes, he moved as if dancing. And the world danced with him. The gloom lifted. For the first time in years, she felt
He's there, under the tree.
a ray of hope.
Come on, you have to keep Dillian going.
The Northmen tell of a great hero. His name is Sigmund. His father's hall was built around a great tree, and one day, Odin comes and thrusts a sword into the tree, a gift to whomever can release it. Many try, but the sword only comes out at Sigmund's touch. His brother-in-law, King Siggeir, wants it, but Sigmund refuses him, so King Siggeir plots revenge. He invites Sigmund and his brothers to a feast, but when they arrive, they are met with an army, not a warm welcome. King Siggeir captures Sigmund and his brothers, steals his coveted sword, and readies them for execution.
I know I'm supposed to be going after the tree, but it's so far away. But yeah, anyway, so I don't know if it's supposed to be that the sense of, like, the feeling that you've lost your abilities is enough to motivate you to use the refresher, or, you know, if it's just as simple as, you know, you drink a health potion when your health is low. But definitely it's really effective in terms of keeping me using that focus mechanic, because I generally would probably not use something like that. And sometimes even for just silly reasons, like I don't have the presence of mind because I'm too focused on the fight. But this is the ladder I was looking for. So I'm sort of relying on the fact that the audio told me that I'm stronger, that I can sort of run for longer periods. And again, it's a really beautiful environment, so even though I'm kind of looking to wrap up, I'm not going to pass down an opportunity to explore a little bit.
Day after day, watching from afar, she mimicked him, perfecting her own secret dance, wishing those fleeting moments of light would stretch out to last forever.
This is a really nice sequence, by the way. Like, there is a certain level of courage in removing the weapon from your character and giving you an extended sequence where you're too weak to really move quickly and
It's a trick. It's an illusion. It's not real.
build up the relationship with Dillian
You want to
through an extended sequence like this. But it's definitely preferable to just putting it all in a cutscene where you can just put the controller down and not do anything.
What does she find? You can't even fight. It's just deception.
How does he so effortlessly court the world and bliss? If only she could do the same. See the world through eyes anew and dance with it, just like he does.
What's your name?
Senua,
I haven't seen you before.
I don't leave home much.
Oh, Zeno's daughter.
I have to go.
Wait. Who taught you to fight like that?
No one.
No one.
Well, I watched you, and
You learnt all of that from watching me? You should become a warrior, you know.
me?
I'm Dillian. I'm here for the warrior trials. Just come and watch. And bring your sword.
You can't put it into words. That moment when you look into the eyes of the one who's supposed to reassure you, make you feel safe. It only takes an instant, Fear swallows you before you have a chance to make sense of it. And darkness becomes a part of who you are. But her world changed the day the Northmen took him from her. Senua knows that there's no going back to how things were. That there's nothing to go back to at all.
Stay still, stay quiet, hide, don't tell her.
Their gods can see into your mind. They will use this power to destroy you.
They won't stop me. I can still feel him.
Whatever's left of him, they will never let him go.
I'm not gonna let him rot here.
You're the one rotting here.
Leave me alone.
You will die here.
No.
And all your suffering will have been for nothing.
Shut up! Dillion? Is that you? I'll find you, my love. I promise.
That was a really wonderful sequence. And I love that they give you the significance of the sword right immediately after they take it away from you.
Lives here. You won't survive. You met him by the tree. She met him by the tree. Maybe it's a sign, the tree.
What's he trying to tell you?
He's waiting for you by the tree.
I really would have thought there would have been some lore here.
Death for Sigmund and his brothers seems certain. But the king's wife is Sigmund's sister, and she begs for mercy and implores the king to chain them up instead. He agrees. Not for mercy, though, but because he plans an even more cruel and lingering death. Chained to a tree in the forest that night, a she-wolf comes and devours one of Sigmund's brothers. She returns, ravenous, night after night, until only Sigmund is left. The next day, Sigmund's sister sends a serpent with honey to smear on Sigmund's face. But to what end? Well, that night, when the she-wolf appears again, you'll never guess what happens. As the she-wolf licks the sweet honey from Sigmund's face, he bites the wolf's tongue. The she-wolf pulls away, but Sigmund holds on. The chains break, and he is free. After his escape, Sigmund lives like us, hidden in the forest. His enemy, King Siggeir, believing him dead, as his sister plots revenge. And for vengeance to succeed, even the great Sigmund needs help. So she sends her sons to him. But their blood is weak and corrupted, and they're put to death by Sigmund. So his sister hatches a new plan, one that is cold of heart and pure of blood.
I'm assuming that red S means that I missed one of the runes before. But I've said I need to wrap up soon. It's just, it always keeps showing me something cool and I want to see where it's going, so let's go into the tree and we'll find a good breaking point.
Take it. A sword. Take it. Dillion left it for you. Take it. Take it. Take it. Take it.
Imagine a sword that can slay gods. Its name is Gramr. It was forged by the god of all Northmen, Odin, and gifted to Sigmund, a great warrior.
I need this sword. It's important. Can you help me?
The sword appears whole, but it is an illusion. It shattered into shards long ago. It is said the great warrior can reforge Gramr by answering the trials of Odin, one for each shard. The roots of the Tree of Death will take you to new lands, where you will face the trials.
Go to the shards. Go to the shard.
Go to the shards.
What's the shard? Find it.
The metal runes.
Yeah.
Stones.
Oh, the Eyes of Sin. I was actually just getting ready to wrap up, but
The runes.
You need that sword.
Go to the shard.
Find the shard.
I'm going to have to do at least one more bit now that you're here. How are you doing? You must have seen this game already.
Focus. Focus. Use your eyes. Look.
Get closer.
What can you see?
A king in the north forced the dwarves to make a sword that would never fail and never rust.
I'll do one of
That would
these and then we'll
slice
wrap it
through
up.
iron and stone and bring victory to its bearer. But the angry dwarves cursed it. It would be the death of a man every time it was drawn. And it would be the death of the king. Let me tell you about the sword Tyrving.
I don't recognize this place.
Where are we? Where is she? It feels wrong.
Where are we now? Burial mound. So strange that we go to such lengths to bury death. Something so very ordinary, inevitable. It's as if we conspire to hide death, because we have no answer for it. But when it comes and forces itself onto our friends or loved ones, then comes the reckoning.
Feel the dead in the air. You can feel the dead. Why would he do this? Turn back. Why would he bring her here? It's not safe here. Why would he do something so dangerous? Why would he never bring you here? Dillion would never do that. He would never go there. Go in. You have to go in.
Take the torch.
It's too dark. Take it. This will help you.
Careful.
You have to be able to see.
Who's there? Dillion, I'm here. I'm here for the trials. Like when we first met, remember? I'll find him. Don't touch the walls.
What's that? Did you hear that? Nothing. Was that voices?
Is that his voice or the voice of the dead?
Not Dillion.
Dillion's calling to you. Can you hear? I can hear him.
It's like he's getting further away. Have you lost him?
You're going the wrong way.
Are you lost?
Senua, you remind me of a story that the Northmen tell about a young woman warrior. Her name is Herver, the daughter of a berserker, born after he was killed. She's a wild, willful child who teaches herself to fight with weapons. When she learns where her father is buried, her only desire is to reclaim the treasure buried with him, but above all, the sword, Tyrving.
He's going to save you.
Find the voice.
Find him.
I probably should have been looking for more stuff to light.
It's not him. It's not him.
We told you. We told you it was a trick.
Find another way. It's not working.
You have to use your mind. Where can you go?
You're failing. Find another way. Think. Focus.
Use your mind.
Where's he gone? He's disappeared. You know, to slip through your fingers once again.
Think clearly. You have to find another way. There has to be another way.
This doesn't sound like Dillian.
What's happening?
Quiet. He wants me to find him. I'm lost without him.
It's not Dillian.
That doesn't sound like Dillian.
It sounds like something more dangerous.
That voice. It's not Dillian. Dillian wants me to face my fears. Father? I'm leaving. I've decided. I think it will be good for me.
It's the darkness. It's speaking through
No,
you.
Dad, it's me. I think I can beat it. In my own way.
I can see the darkness in your eyes, child.
I met a boy.
Boy.
The chief had son.
No.
He said he could help me.
It's a trick.
He said I could be normal.
Normal.
Yes.
No boy is going to save you. No one can. When they see the rot growing inside you,
No.
they will turn their back on you. The gods can only fix you through my hand. You're going nowhere.
No.
You will not defy the gods. Come, child, take my hand. Come. Senua.
I am leaving.
You cannot escape the darkness. Your curse will make everyone suffer. You will have blood on your hands!
This game does a very good job of So,
You did it, but there's more.
yes, I can do another one, but I need to go to the main menu. This game does a really good job. So obviously, you start with the cries of Dillian, and you realize it's someone else, and then you face your fears, and now you find out exactly what the cries were. This game does a really good job of sort of letting you fill in the blank. I'm really, really impressed with the story they're telling. I'm actually quite sorry I'm not able to go further, but I'm already 40 minutes past. So all I can say is I have no idea why it took me so long to get back to this. The only real worry that I have is that clearly I have very little to say during a game like this, and when I do try to say something that's maybe relevant to the game, there's always the risk that there is more dialogue going over it. But I definitely want to play more of it, and I'm going to run on the assumption that people would like to see this game completed rather than just me do it on my own. If you don't, obviously feel free to let me know. You can do that in chat. If it's on YouTube, you can just leave a comment. But I'm definitely feeling like jumping into this on Friday, because from what I understand, it is not a particularly long game. So we might even be able to wrap it up this week. This is really impressive. If you've not played it, I'm fairly certain it's available on most sort of subscription services now. Like, I'd be shocked if it wasn't on the Xbox Pass, because they own Ninja Theory now. But if you haven't checked it out, please do. Like, it's very, very well crafted. Like, it's a fun game to play, but it is also just very well crafted. Like, the audio work on it is exceptional. I know probably most of you aren't listening with headphones on, but just the way that they play with location, it's something else. Let me just take a quick minute and see who's online. I will also just take a quick minute for something a bit selfish. I do have a new blog post up. Objectively, the most objective review of Objectively the best game of 2000. So I'll put that link into chat, or you can just go to systemchalk.ca. You can also go to systemchalk.com, but I'm Canadian, damn it. You got to use the CA address. I don't know if you're still around here, Johnny, but what do you think of this game? Is there any chance I'm going to get a chance to see you play it? Otherwise, is there anything else for me to really say? We're sort of back into... I'm back into being a little bit of a free agent, so I think probably the oncoming week or so, we've got... what else? Probably Age of Wonders Planetfall on Mondays for the next little while. Then I would say... I'll wrap up Hellblade, so that probably won't take more than a few more days, I would think. And then after that, this is sort of the first of a number of games that I've sort of wanted to wrap up or otherwise sort of get back to and properly address. So I'll start kind of opening up the peaks a little bit. I'll probably talk to a few more people about what's going on, but this game is really impressive. Like, I have to keep playing it. If I didn't have work in the morning, I would probably be jumping into it right away. But not as many people as I was expecting online right now, but my dear friend Ponce is online. Now, Ponce used to be a League of Legends streamer. Oops, sorry, that's not his link. Let me try that again. Raid, P-A-W-N-C-E. Ponce is he used to be a League of Legends streamer. He now has actually done sort of more majority Dark Souls, I would say, is the sort of stuff he's been doing. But he's kind of back into the Riot games with Legends of Runeterra. So I'll admit, I don't quite have the mind for CCGs. They're enjoyable, and I do play them. I really like Android Netrunner and the original Netrunner. It's just the online ones, especially. I just can't really get a grip on them compared to, say, playing some of the other more strategy-oriented games that I like. But Ponce is a really nice guy, very relaxed. If I were to put you in touch with a card gaming streamer, he's the one who I would. So I hope you guys hang around. He's definitely a good guy. Unfortunately, he is sort of at the point where he is reevaluating whether or not he can continue to do streaming for a living. So this is actually another reason why I would like to send you on to his way. So I'd appreciate if you hang around for the concurrent view. If not, I understand it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but definitely see if Ponce is your kind of caster, because when he doesn't play Legends of Runeterra, he usually plays a few things that I know you guys like to watch. So as for me, I'll see you all on Friday, and until then, I hope you have a good night.